Oh, good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Norwich Selectboard. This is Wednesday, December 28th, 2022. My name is Marcia Calloway, currently serving as chair. I'm joined by, in alphabetical order, board members Roger Arnold, Robert Gear, Mary Layton, vice chair, and Aaron Lamperti. Pursuant to Act 78, this meeting is being held fully remotely with Zoom access technology, which permits attendance of the public by Zoom and by telephone. The board has posted and included in the meeting agenda the information that enables direct access and participation. The agenda and packet materials were distributed via the Norwich listserv and are available on the town website under the Select Board tab. For those people dialing in by telephone, you can press 9 to raise your hand and *6 when you're recognized by the chair to speak. Thank you again to Mary Layton, who continues to take the minutes of the meeting while fully participating, and to Rob Gear, who's managing our Zoom technology with a tape for the CATV who are unable to join us this evening. The first item on the agenda is the agenda review, item number 2. I note that there are 3 changes to the agenda. The first is item number 4, which should be amended to include the citation for 1 V.S.A 317C17. The second one is item number 6, which should be added to address the so-called SCUBA or SCBA package purchase from designated funds. And the third is item number 7, to be added to address the consent agenda as to correspondence only. May we have a motion to amend the agenda to add items 6 for the SCUBA purchase, 7 for the consent agenda, and the amendment of number 4.
So moved.
Thank you, Mary Layton. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Rob Gear. All in favor? Thank you. Motion approves unanimously. Informational items are next. This is time that's used for important information for which there's no immediate action or public comment. As in our last board meeting, and to accommodate our contracted interim finance director, we are moving the informational items section to the top of our meeting agenda tonight, and the presentation by Joyce Hasbrouck will be first. Board members are asked to keep track of their questions and hold them until the end of her presentation. There will be no public questions. This is the third pass on the budget by the board. As a result of all our work tonight, Joyce will receive a bulleted list from the board of A, things to be added to the budget, and B, things to be subtracted from the budget. This list will be provided to Joyce by Friday, December 30th. The final work on the budget will prevent Joyce from having time to answer further questions after this meeting. Everyone will note that answers to questions posed to Joyce at the last meeting are included in this packet by copy of the original email questions and the answers by Joyce, which are shown in green ink. On January 4, 2023, the final budget, which incorporates the last changes, will be presented in the packet for board review and vote. Excuse me. On January 11, 2023, the final budget will go to the reviewers and to the printers for the town report. At this point, I would like to invite Interim Finance Director Joyce Hasbrouck to speak to us. Joyce? Do we see Joyce?
Is she here?
Do not,
No. Okay.
unless she's on phone connection.
It could be by phone.
I don't think she was intending to. Do you know, Brennan?
She was intending to be on Zoom. So let me see if I can call her right now and see what's going on there. Hold on.
Okay. I should take a moment to say that during our recent period of discomfort with a lot of snow and ice, we owe a huge debt of thanks to all of the emergency services people, including our own Captain Lamperti, who rose to the occasion and opened up the Department of Safety building so that there was a place for people to go and get warm and charge batteries and things. And it was a good moment for town.
Thank you, Aaron.
You're welcome.
So,
It was fun to do.
Brennan?
sorry, update. So Joyce believes she is in the waiting room at the moment, waiting to be let in. Is she on
Not
there?
on my,
Okay.
not on my screen.
All
You might
right.
have to
Let me see
try a
if she
different
can
link.
relog in. Yeah, hold on one sec here.
No stress.
It would be nice if we could have perhaps one link so that it was always the same. Yes, Roger.
Do we want to reorder the agenda so we can maybe? So we
She's
can.
just being admitted.
Okay.
So Joyce, I think I recognize you here, and you'll be in a second. All right, good.
Where's Joyce?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Joyce, you've had an introduction and we're now ready for you to begin your presentation.
Ah, okay. Are we going to have me share screen or do you want me to just talk?
It's up to you. Whatever you'd planned is fine.
Okay. Then I would like to share if I could be enabled to do that. While we're getting that ready, so for the presentation tonight, I'm going to just focus on the changes that were made to the past two budget and answering the questions that were posed last week after the presentation. So packet materials have the answers to many of the questions I received last week. I also received a couple more questions this week. So where possible, I've attempted to incorporate all of the questions and make that work for everybody. I also, the first thing in the packet was the budget pass 2 and 3 calculation keys. And I included that so that you can have all those bullets that I gave you last week, because that is really the keys for creating the FY24 budget. The same assumptions are used for tonight's pass. So I'm not going to repeat all those because you've got them, but I do want to remind everybody that we're still working under the expiring union contract. And the bargaining for the new contract is still underway. Therefore, we are under advisement of attorneys as to which details we are able to present publicly and to use in the creation of the 24 budget. So some discussions items will need to be held in executive sessions until such time as we have public documents ready. So let's see if I can share.
Should be able to.
Yep, I just got to get the right screen here. All right. So you should be able to see the budget keys that I used? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So then the budget questions is where I'm just kind of jump in. So the list of budget questions is what Miranda compiled for us to use from last week's meeting. So again, I'm not going to spend any time restating what was already presented and answered in this document. But I do want to try to fill in some of the details on the questions that were either partially answered or were deferred in this presentation. So scroll down over here. All right, so in the list of questions, I'm going to start with the email from Erin and talk about the updates to the job roster. So this section, we're actually going to refer to the exhibits 1 and 2 from the packet, plus the Recreation Department Q&A that was provided in the addendum. So let's see, these are the bullets here. So first bullet, after discussion with the department heads and talking with Brendan from the outcome of the last week's meeting, the decision was made to eliminate the planning assistant from the budget. We felt that upon hiring the director of planning and zoning, then more discussions could be made regarding what other positions in a job description that will be needed for that department. So we combined the town manager and DPW admin assistants to make up that one FTE. So on the job roster, you'll see the updated purple highlights. That is that one FTE that's shared. Ours now DPW and town manager's office. And that also has been changed in the salary and benefits. So the dollar amounts and the costing for that is in here. And then if we go back to bullet 2 here, removing the assistant or the rec assistant. As I said, that's more complicated. So Bree and I spent a good share of time creating that Q&A that we presented in the addendum. Unfortunately, I messed up the names of some of the programs. So on your handout, what was listed on this top line as aftercare program should actually be weekday wind downs. And the second one I had listed as summer daycare, and that should actually be summer after camp care. So then the rest of this, Bree and I looked at the four most popular rec programs, and it netted to what you showed, we show here, which is a total of $92,500 in revenue increases. So the revenue increases here are a direct result of adding that assistant to help run more programs and to accept more children into the existing programs. After quantifying the revenue gains because of adding this position and not having time to gather the added expenses by eliminating the position, we left the position in the job roster. There are other factors related to funding of this position that are listed in the Q&A that I will not spend time on reading. But as you read that part 1 of the Q&A, you will see that there's both monetary and non-monetary reasons for leaving this position in the job roster, at least for this time. And then bullet 3 was the PD discussion. And that we will need to make in an executive session based on qualifying things I've already talked about. But you can see on the job roster that there is a change to the number of positions down here. So there are now in this pass 2 crossing guards and elimination of 1 officer by combining a police officer and a community safety officer in one line.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Cheryl Lindbergh is in the waiting room and needs to be let in. Rob? Did you
I
hear
think
me?
he's on it.
Okay. Thank you. There she is. Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay. So that answers those questions and fleshes that out a little bit more. And then I'm going to look down at Roger's second question. which also needed to be fleshed out a little bit more. This is regarding the recalculation of the salaries. So what I've done here is I've prepared a salary testing workbook that we can use in our executive session to test various personnel scenarios. However, because of the sensitive nature of discussing personnel matters and the ongoing collective bargaining, that's not ready for public viewing. But I do have that ready to share with you, select board folks. And then when I incorporate those roster changes, that gets us changes to the total department salary and benefits. And here's a comparison of those. So the summary results of the above mentioned positions moves the total salary and benefits as compared to FY23 budget from an increase of 14.78% at a cost of 4.5 cents to 11.21% or 3.5 cents. As a reminder, the cost is calculated using $76,000 worth of increase equals approximately 1 cent in the taxes. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more as we get to the end of this short presentation, I hope, that I'm going to give you tonight. Next, I looked at the designated funds, and the designated funds had very few changes. In fact, there were only 2. So the appropriation of the $107,000 for the tennis courts was removed from Fund 17, which was the tennis courts, and replaced with $10,200, which was the appropriation amount in both FY22 and FY23. Part 2 of the Rec Department question and answer sheet speaks to this topic in depth, and I will leave further comments and discussions for that at a later time. But for the budget purposes, that has been removed. I also received a request from the town clerk yesterday to add the 5,000 rather appropriation for the record restoration back into Fund 45. So though that's not shown in your packet down here, I did put it into the ending results on the workbook, so that will be reflected in the final tax numbers that I have for you tonight. But you just won't see it here. And I will have that in the next presentation of the budget, unless I'm told to take it back out again, but it's planned to be in there. And then if I use the current past 3 budget, the unexpected expense and emergency reserve fund, which is number 50 down here at the bottom, with a balance of $750,000, that is currently sitting at 13.48%. So we're still within our 12 to 16% requirement that we have been asked for. So then I want to jump over to the revenues. So looking at the revenue, we can see the tax revenue line, which is this top one here, actually dropped to 5.108 because I added that $5,000 in. And it was 5,282 in past 2. So the overall revenue increase compared to the 23 budget is actually up $1,077,000, which is 20% over the FY23 budget, which gains us 14 cents to be used for our expenses. No other revenue lines in this presentation have been changed on the, for the revenue side. Let's see, so I'm going to go back down here, and then if we just do a quick overview of the budget expenses, other than the salary and designated fund updates that I noted earlier, no other changes have been put on the expense parts of the budget for past 3 either. So the current pass shows the town expenditure, including the monetary items, is up 11.76% over the FY23 budget for an added cost of 8 cents. And that is just calculated by taking this increase here, 0.7385 over where we started at FY23, 0.652. So then what does that all mean for taxes? Because this is the big question that everybody's been asking me. How does that translate into taxes? So as I prepared a slide for you for this. And using the costing method of calculating the taxes, which is what I've been showing you on each line item of the budget passes, netting the revenue gain against the increased expenses, we land at a tax rate of 62 cents. And this compares to the historical method that you are used to seeing, which gives us a tax rate of 63.7 cents. So the comparison tells me that the cost method used throughout the workbooks is a fair estimate of the cost line item changes that we can kind of use instead of having to track and move everything around. It's an estimator that is pretty valid. But then I spent some time working on what you're used to seeing for the tax calculation, which is part of it in the bottom of this graphic here. So to get my numbers, I used the grand list of $801,593,000 as presented in April of 2022. There was no more recent data available at this point, so that's what the number was that I used.
I'm not sure if we're seeing the graph, Donna.
I used the school tax rates as shown in the letter from the State of Vermont Department of Taxes. Non-residential taxes 1.7372.
Joyce, I think you froze for a minute there, and we're looking at Exhibit 7. Is that what you want us to look at?
It's not actually in one of the exhibits. So can you see my screen?
No, we just see Exhibit 7.
No.
Oh. All right, let me stop sharing and try again. All right, now can we see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Thank you for catching me on that. So this top paragraph is looking at the line item comparison of the taxes that have been used in the workbooks. It lands at 62 cents. Just looking at $75,000 equals 1 penny. It comes out to 62 cents for the tax rate. And if we look at the comparison down below, we're at 63.7 cents. So it was pretty close. So as an estimated item line change, that was pretty close. And then the grand list is calculated on 800. This is the 801,593,000. That was what was presented in April of 22, which was the most recent data that Cheryl had that she could share with me. And then the school rates are from the approved FY23 tax letter from the State of Vermont Department of Taxes. And you can see the homestead rate is 1.9, the non-residential rate is 1.7. So those are what is used in the current calculation of the taxes. So then next paragraph here, using the pass-through budget, the revenue and expense figures, plus the $5,000 appropriation request for the records restoration, the above grand list and school tax rates, the town budget without the articles increases 8.29% from 54 cents to 58 cents, and that's in this line right here. And then if we add the monetary articles, which increased 6.95% over FY23 budget, it gives us the amount to raise from our taxes in the operating budget down here of $5,108,545. And that ends up being 64 cents compared to 59 cents or 7.71% increase, which translates to 46 cents. So that's kind of where we are with the budget stuff and tax numbers. So I did create a testing workbook that if we make changes for the salaries in that executive session, I could plug them into my expense workbook, and that will flow over into a new tax calculation so we can have some quick presentation items for those salaries that we can present. And then based on that, we can go forward with some of the decisions you need to make for the final pass. And then I had one more group of questions, and that I had several people who questioned me regarding the surplus and deficit numbers I presented last week. And I was able to summarize all of those questions into two questions. One is, where did the deficit numbers come from? And then second was, explain the deficit. So for the first, the derivation of the numbers is straight from NEMRC reports. I have no personal history or prior years, and so rely solely on the financial system for the data. We also need to bear in mind that FY22 fiscal audit has not been completed, nor do I expect it to be completed by the time the budget goes to print. So if there are coding errors, they stand as provided to the auditors, and I can make no warranties as to their accuracy because I've just not had any time to work on that piece of the pie here. The second question is a high-end answer to why there was a deficit. It appears that in FY21, we presented a balanced budget, and when all was said and done, there was actually a surplus at the end of the year of the $439,000. Then in FY22, the budget was created to use the prior year surplus and net to a balanced budget. However, there were cost overruns that caused the net deficit for the 2 years to be $230,000. So as I stated last week, I do expect the FY23 will also have a deficit since many costs, including some of the salaries and energy costs, are going over budget. So that's what I have. So I'm going to turn it back to you, Marcia, and I don't know if you want me to show anything else, if I froze it along the line somewhere, or where you want to go from there.
Thank you very much, Joyce. I turn to the board. Do you have any questions for Joyce? Mary?
I just like having her notes after the fact because it is a lot to take in.
Yes, that worked
Agreed.
well.
Very,
Yeah.
very well presented, but it's fast and need to digest it. So,
Yeah. Rob, I think you were next.
Yes. Do the budget spreadsheets indicate which departments, which items were over budget?
Yes, it does. Because if you look at, all right, let me get the right exhibit up here.
Rob, are you referring to the cost overruns?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My PDF just went away. All right, let me open it back up again. It's in the expense budget pass worksheet because it shows the prior year and the current budget and the new budget.
And that's something you have and we don't, right?
No, actually, you guys have it in your packet. It's Exhibit 6 in the
Okay.
packet.
Okay, thank you.
And it would probably be FY22 budget, FY22 actual.
Correct. Yep.
So,
And I got mine pulled back up, so if you want me to share that, I can. I don't know
Sure.
what happened to it before. Okay. I don't know why all right, let me do this. All right, so hopefully you can see this now. So this is what you normally look at that has all the expense line items. So the FY23 budget is here against the FY22 current and actuals are there. but you're right, this presentation does not have the year-to-date stuff in there. So I would have to go back and look at that for the November financial reports, would have that.
Sure.
But Joyce, if there was an overrun at this point, it would be a larger overrun, right?
Yes, and some of it is because the way I look at it is things are not necessarily expensed on the
You're
same
freezing.
GL lines as I would have put them. So they may be in another line. So one line looks like it's overspent and another line looks like it's underspent. So that was why I tried to compile the like expenses last week to see if I could get a handle on what groups of expenses are overspent or not.
Okay, thank you. Roger?
So a process question. So I would like to begin to talk about the budget. As you could probably, as Joyce probably knows well, there's like columns that really need board direction. So we need to like actually have the space for a conversation on them. However, I know that you're running a process where we have to be sort of sensitive to people's time, right? So, and I know that Joyce has alluded to joining us in a session to discuss salary line items. So what is the process? Like when can we actually begin to do the work of making the decision points that we need to make while also respecting people's time?
Right, we're going to use this moment to allow the board to ask Joyce questions that can be asked in general about what they've just seen and what she's explained. Then the executive session is basically to discuss the appointment, employment of employees in the context of budget issues and any sort of preliminary determination on policy things that are also exempt. So those discussions will be had there. And then in number 5, the third pass budget discussions is where the board can hash out whatever it wants to hash out in public. And then
I guess my comment is something I might want Joyce to know, but also is more intentional for number 5. So I'll phrase as a question now. Okay, I'll phrase as a question now. I alluded to one of the core documents that I thought was important was the 5-year capital plan document that we made last year that we approved. For example, that document allowed me to understand that the package for the fire department that we're asked to approve tonight is totally on track, and it is fully funded, and it is in line with the request is in line with the funds that we have and anticipated. So to that end, the tennis courts are $320,000. $96,000 of that was anticipated to be from grant funds, which means that there's a core cost of $84,000 to the town. That is what we had planned. That is in some ways what we had authorized. And so last year was 10-2, as Joyce alluded to. And so this year, in that document, we should be allocating $40,000 to it, right? Meanwhile, I think the ask from the department is to fix the courts proper, like fund them fully. So I guess my tension in all of our discussions is now there's 3 versions of the truth sort of existing, right? And so the version that I like is the one, of course, that I enunciated, which is from last year, which is we approved this document, we got the 10-2 covered, we're going to do 40 this year. But of course, now in making that decision, which I had hoped would be assumed, Joyce has to go back and she has to make some changes, right? Which is a labor. So I think.
And that she had anticipated that after this evening, we're supposed to put together a list of the add-ins and the subtract outs.
Okay. So I guess to my point about processes, we can sort of dig in, right, as we will, and like hash it all out based on, who has an institutional memory or how we want to make changes, or we can get on the same page about what documents we want to use. So we can just, press forward. So I sent that, I found it in a January 13th, 2022 packet. I resent it to all of you. It has us making us appropriations to reserve funds. And so when I say like, where do we begin with the budget? It's looking at that document, looking at our obligations for salaries, and then going forth, right?
Well, in our third pass tonight, I'll ask you to bring that up, right? You can bring that document and we can review it, and that'll go on our bulleted list for Joyce. And next week when we meet, she will have added in and subtracted out anything that we directed her to do. And that should be the final budget.
Okay, it's just, you could see how difficult that is, and also how alienating that is, you know, in terms of a board conversation, right? You know, one board member making an argument to a group when it's really just what we all did last year anyway.
I don't think that's what we're going to do. I think we're reviewing what we said last year. We haven't actually pulled up the capital things and said, we're going to change anything this year, right? So they exist from last year, and we can revisit them and say, we're going to do this that we said we would. And that goes on the bullet for Joyce, and she can easily add those in. So I don't see this as a difficult exercise. I may be wrong. I often am. Okay. So Cheryl Lindbergh has a question or a comment.
Before we get too far along, who's making the list of bullets to add in and subtract off? Am I to be making that, or somebody else making that bullet list for me?
I believe in belts and suspenders. So if you can, you make the list, and I'll keep a list, and maybe Mary can keep track as well in the minutes.
I'll try.
And Brennan, you too. Cheryl, are you ready with a question or a comment?
Yes, Cheryl Lindbergh, and I'm speaking on as a lister at the moment. And I just want to say that the number that Joyce has for the grand list is our gross municipal grand list. It is not the grand list upon which we are going to use to set the tax rate. That number is back down near, let me look it up here. I've got it right here. It's back down around 763,816,138. That is after current use and exemptions and everything else. Of course, to divide that by 100, and that's our municipal grand list number, not the 800 and some odd thousand.
Cheryl, can you just repeat it one more time? Make sure I have the number written down right.
Okay. It should be 763,816,138 be that municipal grand list number. Okay, great. I am secondly, as treasurer and citizen, wanting to just say that a deficit is not something that is allowed by statute. The voters vote an expenditure budget, and that's what's allowed to be spent. My recollection during FY22 is that many capital items went through the general fund as an expenditure, and those should have been items that came out of a reserve fund instead. And there should have been a warrant out of that reserve fund for those capital purchases. So I'm concerned that the numbers in the FY22 NEMRIC general ledger report are incorrect because of those items being booked and not reallocated. Maybe Joyce can correct me, and I'm happy to have her confirm that those things were reclassified, but I asked questions about that during FY22, and I'm still concerned that that may be what is reflecting in the NEMRIC software a deficit. Lastly, I would say that in August or thereabouts, our finance director was reporting a $250,000 surplus for FY22. And so that again is conflicting with the information we're getting right now. And that's what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to follow up a question with Joyce. Is that business about the general fund expenditures? Is that going to be caught in the audit?
I have actually, Fielding presented the auditors with a trial balance. And when we're in the middle of an outside audit, once you've presented the trial balance to the auditors, you can't make more changes to the actual trial balance. You can make proposed journal entries and share those with the auditors, which I have done, but I have not changed anything that's on the trial balance. So before Fielding left, if he had done journal entries to reclass things, those would have been shown in the auditor's trial balance, which is what's currently on NEMRIC. So I cannot speak to Cheryl's question because I cannot change what's in NEMRIC until we get through that audit. But short answer is yes, those things should be found in the audit.
Okay.
When I can circle back to that and work with the auditors.
Thank you.
Yep.
Roger.
So I assume Cheryl was not speaking as a lister when she made her most recent comments. So
She said she was a resident.
she was a treasurer. So so there's actually, we're happy any board member can send out the correspondence between this question of surplus and so-called deficit, because it was a heated, unfair exchange between two municipal officials, and we have extensive documentation that we're able to put forward to provide some context for you, Joyce. It was very unfortunate. But nonetheless, there's a narrative that is made plain and I think should be helpful to you. And the board took.
But where I am right now, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
that's
so,
fine.
So I think
Roger, I think we'll just wait for the audit to salt it all out.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I do think that none of us should be really having this conversation because only an audit can confirm any surplus or deficit, as Joyce alluded to. Correct. But nonetheless, the illusions that have been made tonight have some public records behind them to help you with your work, Joyce.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll stick with you.
I've kind of tabled that until I can get through the budget.
Right. Aaron?
So could you walk us through, like with some numbers, how you got the tax rate of 64 cents or 62 cents or whatever it was? Because no matter what I do, I am getting more than 70 cents just on the back of an envelope.
So are you looking at, all right, I'm going to share this one. So you're looking at the 62 cents for the costing?
Yeah.
So what's your method, Aaron?
Well, so I take 5.6 million and I divide it by 76,000, and then I get 73 or cents or something like that.
Are you taking into account the revenue increase?
Well, what revenue increase? This is revenue. So what revenue increase? That's what I probably need to understand.
Let's see. Oh, I'm having trouble with my PDFs today. Because you can't see that, right? You just have a blank screen. All right. Let me go back to my notes. So when I look at the, let's see, I'll find it. Right here, revenues. All right, so we saw the revenue increased $1,077,497 over the 23 budget. So that's a 20% increase, which equates to, using our $76,000 cost estimator, 17-cent increase. So then the contra of that is the expenses that also increased, but they increased 11.76 cents or 8 cents. 11.76%, 8 cents. So the difference between that is the 6.2.
Right. So let me tell you how I'm thinking about it, and you can explain why I'm wrong. We need to raise $5.6 million with property taxes. Is that right?
Yes.
And is that set right? So
5.108 is what I have right now. Well,
and
but
we're our estimate for we're raising that on 700 or whatever it is, $760 million of property tax, which we're doing. So we're dividing that by 100 for our cents thing. So we just take that we take our 5.6 million divided by our 76,000, and that's the tax rate. That's how much we have to tax each $100 of real estate in order to raise that much money. I mean, I understand your calculation had to do more with year to year, but this is isn't this just a simple calculation? We have to raise this much money on this much property tax, on this much property.
Yeah, you can look at it that way too. Yeah.
Okay, and then you get 73 cents.
What I was trying to do is just show that the estimations put on the line items when you're trying to figure out a cost of something is a way to kind of look at one line item instead of looking at the whole.
Oh, I understand that, but what I'm saying is I want to look at the whole. So the whole is 5.6 million, and we divide it by $76,000 to rate to whatever 76,000 is. That's the 100th of our property value, and that's how much we have to. That's how much we have to bill $100 worth of real estate in order to make that 5.6 million. And that comes out to 73 cents. So,
and then wasn't Joyce saying that that was offset by the revenue that we take in elsewhere?
No, because with the revenue we take in elsewhere makes up the difference between 5.6 and 6.3 or whatever the total is. The amount we have to raise from real estate taxes is 5.6. If that's how I read, I mean, I'm obviously there's some piece of this that I'm not getting, or I think must be some piece of this I'm not getting. But it seems to me if we're raising $5.6 million on $760 million of real estate, we need to charge 73 cents per 100. Isn't that just so?
All right, I'm going to, oh goodness, I don't know if you can.
Yeah, we can see that.
You see my workbook here. This is a tax calculation workbook.
Yes.
So I just updated this with the number that Cheryl gave me, 763, 618, or 816 rather. And here's the tax rates that I had quoted. So that brings us down here. So here's our total budget that we need to raise. So this is amount to raise from property taxes without the local agreement stuff, which is calculated over here on the side. And so that gives us a rate at 6.688 compared to last year, which was 5.917.
Okay, so we actually don't raise 5.6, we raise 5.1. That's probably what it is.
5.108. This is the amount we need to raise according to where the past stands right now.
Okay, that's 6. Okay, now, okay, that's fine. So 6.7, that's 6.7. So how do we get to 6.4 or 6.2 or whatever it was you had up there?
Well, that was using the higher tax amount.
Oh, okay. So that's that there. Okay, gotcha. All right. So we're at 6.
Right.
So we're at 67 cents now. Okay, I'm with you.
Right. Yep.
So
Yep.
it's this local agreement taxes is what I think I didn't.
Yeah, because this stuff was in the calculator. Yep.
I don't think I know what that is,
Yes,
but okay.
This is what I prepared because I knew this is what you guys were used to looking at. And everything is formula driven based off the current expenses, which is what's in the past that you have.
Aaron, local agreement is those guys don't get taxed apparently.
So why does that decrease the amount that we need to raise if somebody doesn't get taxed?
We have less ability, we have like less that we can draw from property taxes.
No, that raises the rate. There's less to draw from. So but there's some difference. We have we have town budget without articles, then we have articles. Anyway, it's okay. I'm sure it's right. I just,
Well, if
I'm
these
seeing,
numbers are taken off from last year's listing, so those may change a little bit too, depending on what the grand list is at the point we need to do it. So this number, this blue number may change a little bit too, which is part of the exemptions. I mean, everything
right,
here is
that's
kind of
exemptions. I'm
target,
looking.
so these are all just estimates.
So, so you're saying we need to raise 5.1 million, but the total, but before we had the amount that was due from property tax was 5.6 million. Now I'm not, town budget without articles, total monetary articles. So then we're to 6 million. Then our revenue is, the revenue from other sources is almost $1 million. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's adding it to me now. I'm not sure. Yeah. I think on some other thing I looked at didn't have. We're good. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Aaron, that helps us all. Okay, does anyone else have any more questions? Did I see a question from Stuart? We weren't going to take questions from the public.
Right.
So he's gone anyway, I think. Okay, so we will move on to number 4 in the order of our process here. Let me just get to my other screen. Okay, so item 4 is executive session for the select board to discuss appointment or employment of employees in the context of budget issues under 1 V.S.A. 313A3 and 1 V.S.A. 317C17. As many people have pointed out to me, budget discussions are open to the public. The exceptions to that include the information covered by 1 V.S.A. 313A3 and 1 V.S.A. 317C17. Is there a motion to enter executive session to consider the appointment or employment of a public officer or officers or employee or employees under 1 V.S.A. 313A3 and for preliminary discussion of other than primarily factual materials which are preliminary to any determination or policy or action and precede the presentation of the budget under 1 V.S.A. 317C17 and to invite the interim town manager, the chief of police, and the interim finance director.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Want to hear it again?
Aaron? Aaron has seconded. Any discussion? Roger?
Why are we inviting a department head into executive session?
Backup. It is the employment of public officers or employees, etc. All right.
I'm fine. I think it's appropriate to have Brennan Duffy as our interim town manager, and then given our staffing currently, I think it makes sense for Joyce to also to be there to help us with the spreadsheets and all of her work. But otherwise, I don't think it's appropriate.
Shall we call the question? All right. All in favor of the motion as proposed? Two. All opposed? And I'm not calling the question now. Roger Arnold, how do you vote?
No.
Aaron Lamperti, how do you vote?
Yes, I guess.
Rob Gear, how do you vote?
No.
Mary Layton, how do you vote?
I vote no.
Marcia Calloway, yes. The motion fails. Can we have a second motion? Mary?
I don't have a motion, but this motion kind of came through kind of like a freight train. And it's not at all clear to me what's happening with this motion. So it needs to be reframed in a way that's understandable.
Right.
Okay. The motion is, the proposal for this session is so that a discussion can be had about particular appointments or employment in the context of budget issues, things that cannot be discussed in a public arena, and also for preliminary discussion of things that are preliminary to a determination of policy or action, things preceding the actual budget. And for those discussions, we would need to have the people that were initially included in the motion.
Could you also, Marcia, explain more about 1 V.S.A. 317C17? Because, you know, it says defines documents exempt from disclosure. What on earth is that?
All right. Now I'm taking advice here, so I am being cautious about how I word everything.
This has to do with the preliminary,
Yes.
preliminary framing. I just need to slow down and understand.
Sure. Under adopted salaries and benefits and salary schedules are non-exempt public records. Under 317C17, an exemption applies to records of interdepartmental or intra-departmental communications in any town to the extent that they cover other than primarily factual materials and are preliminary to any determination of policy or action or precede the presentation of the budget at a meeting held in accordance with the section. So basically anything that is product which helps people make a decision about what they're going to do with the budget. That's what we're talking about.
How can it not be factual?
Because factual in this context, as I understand it, refers to things that have already been decided and are part of a public sort of record. It's somebody's salary. It's
So it's undocumented?
Yeah, an existing policy, something like that. Yes, Roger.
So my reasons are far more basic. We're discussing salaries of several departments, which involves like confidential, like personal information, right? And affects, we're talking about people's jobs across departments. And so I don't know why you would make why would you, and we're allowed to invite people into our executive session, right? And so I don't know why you would, we're discussing, we're not inviting our rec director according to that motion, right? So I don't know how we're determining the appropriateness of who to invite in. And so I just simply said, I stated transparently for our community that it is appropriate for our interim town manager to be with us, of course. And I think given our circumstances, we were capably being assisted by Joyce during this budget year. And so it is by necessity that they also join us. And so I support the motion with those two individuals joining us in discussion for this pass-through conversation. So that is what I've offered.
The idea was that the rec department isn't invited, for example, because the assistant director position, I think, was removed. Is that correct, Joyce?
No,
Oh,
not
it's
correct.
left in.
Sorry.
It's still there.
It's left in.
But I don't believe that there's been any movement towards a person being identified for a position. Whereas I think that might be a different situation, and I don't want to get too deeply into this, in the Department of the Police. And therefore, it was germane to discussions about positions that are on offer. Brennan, would you like to offer anything?
Yeah, so I guess it was my suggestion that the police chief be invited to attend the executive session, because I think he is probably the only one who can provide some of the detail that we might need to hear as you make a decision about the budget and salaries, staffing, and other detail there. Without him, I don't know how that gets accurately explained. And I thought it would be good on the other side to give the police chief a little direction here coming out of tonight as to what the select board would like to see him move forward with as far as resources. So that was my reasoning for wanting to invite the police chief.
Mary? Thank you, Brennan.
I'm wondering why the 313A3 is not sufficient, especially if it has to do with consideration of the person who would, is under consideration for employment. I don't
Advice
know.
of
The other
counsel.
one confuses me.
Yeah, I know it's confusing, but I'm taking advice of counsel. So I think that essentially this discussion, where, a town manager is responsible for the hiring and salaries for departments. We're in a situation where we have an interim town manager who is reporting directly to our board, and a brand new chief of police who came in with the understanding that he was to build a department. So at this stage, I think the chief probably needs some guidance from this board, and how this board discusses that without violating the open meeting law, without violating the constraints that are imposed by collective bargaining, is a very difficult proposition. Therefore, to do this and be of assistance to our interim town manager, who has some limitation of powers, and to the new police chief that we are trying to encourage and support, this is the most straightforward way for us to get that information to the chief and to our interim town manager. And then ultimately, it will all come out in the budget and be perfectly visible to the people in this community. Mary?
I wanted to add too that on complicated motions like this, I do rely on the motion sheet. And so the first part that you read referred to 1 V.S.A 313A3. The second statute that was referenced was 1 V.S.A 31216 in the motion. And then you brought in 317C17. So what's up with 1 V.S.A 31216?
I'm looking for my motion sheet. It could be, one second.
She might be cluttering up our motion with too many references, maybe.
That's Marcia having a middle-aged moment.
Okay,
It is nothing at all.
okay.
I'm trying to do the motion sheet. So, with apologies.
So that second one should have been 1 V.S.A 317C17.
Yes.
You get that right? Okay,
Yes.
that's what I thought. I wonder if we could simplify this motion. I don't know if anyone's really willing to consider it again, but just to cite both of those without the explanation.
Please do.
All right, well, let's just see how this goes. I move to enter executive session to consider the appointment or employment of a public officers or employees under 1 V.S.A 313A3 Oh boy, now I'm going to get into it. Let's see.
And
All right. This is going to sound the same, I think. And for preliminary discussion of other than primarily factual materials, which are preliminary to any determination or policy or action, and which precede the presentation of the budget under 1 V.S.A 313C17,
no, 317C17.
1 V.S.A 317
C17.
C 1 V.S.A 317 C17. Let's see.
That's right.
Right. And maybe we could start with inviting the interim town manager and the interim finance director, at least as a start, because then we would be, sort of taking under consideration Roger's concerns.
Yes. And we could make if we could, a friendly amendment and to possibly invite the chief of police if necessary.
That's okay with me. Of course, this is not even seconded yet, but
Right. Is there a second for that motion? No.
I'll second.
Thank you, Rob. Shall I call the question? Roger Arnold,
Yes.
Aaron Lamperti,
Sure.
Rob Gear,
Yes.
Mary Layton,
yes.
and Marcia Calloway, yes. Thank you very much. We will now move into executive session.
Gordon.
I move to enter public session.
I second.
All in favor? We're in public session at 9:39. The board requests a 5-minute break. So we're going to do that, and then we'll come back and resume item number 5 on, we have to finish this particular item number 4, and then we'll move to 5. So I will see you all back here at 9:40. Let's give it 9:45. Okay. All right, just waiting for Mary.
Yeah.
There she is. Okay. All right, we resumed public session at 9:39, I believe. Took a 5-minute break, and now we will conclude the executive session with comments that sort of indicating the results of our work. So in terms of positions for the new budget, I'm going to go through the positions that we discussed as being included in the budget for this year and those that are out of the budget this year. And the board will discuss those topics. So first position, the rec department assistant. Does anyone wish to speak to that particular position? Mary?
I support putting that in the budget because I think it will provide some needed programming that people in the town will enjoy. And it will also bring in some more revenue. I think it'll pay for itself.
Thank you. And did we have any parameters that we wanted to discuss? Aaron?
Yeah, I also support the position, but we talked about the real unknown of whether or not it would be revenue neutral and the impact over time of a new position. So we discussed having it be a one-year trial, and then we would revisit at the end of that for the second year, or for ongoing for after that.
Thank you. Roger, do you have a comment?
Just quickly, I understand it to be mostly a programmatic position. In other words, it will be used to expand programming for the recreation department. And so to the extent that it's a job description for any duties that would be under a building and grounds operator, I would be cautious that is a matter of, that's a bargained position. And so I support a temporary programmatic position here.
And the town manager will be working with that as well. And then the AA position in the town manager's office to share the duties of town manager and DPW department. Does anyone wish to speak to that? Aaron?
I'll just sort of briefly describe what we talked about as best I understand it, which is that we are going to take the unused half-time position of administrative assistant from DPW that is not being filled, and that Chris is not in a rush to fill, and move it to the town manager's office. And we're also we're also moving a half-time administrative assistant from that was never filled from the planning department, and together they're going to make a full-time administrative assistant in the town manager's office, who is going to do administrative duties for DPW and the rest of the town government as needed. So, but definitely supporting the DPW administratively, but doing it from the town manager's office. I think that's what we talked about.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on that? Roger?
I would just restate it a little, maybe it'll, for clarity, or maybe in my own words, as Aaron said, there was a budgeted position that has not been filled, half-time in DPW, that we've created now a part-time position in the town manager's office. And with the part-time and moving the part-time salary line from DPW and moving that to make it a full-time position, admin assistant position in the town manager's office, that will perform some duties, administrative duties for DPW and the town manager's office. Aaron alluded to a part-time zoning administrator position, which do you want to get into now, Marcia?
Go right ahead. It's
And
related.
The part-time zoning administrator position had been previously budgeted. We are merging the zoning administrator duties back into the planning director role, and not having that line item in that office.
But this will not affect the existing part-time person that's already there.
No, it was a zoning administrator, not a planning assistant, that we are effectively removing from this year's budget. So that's maybe the most clear part that I'll clarify.
So bottom line, there'll be two people in that office.
One person will be part-time, one part-time assistant, and then a full-time planning director and zoning administrator.
Yeah, so two people.
Yeah.
All right. And then the new position in the town manager's office of an assistant town manager. Anyone like to speak to that? Aaron.
Again, I'll just describe what I understand, which is that we're taking the current position held by Miranda Bergmeyer and changing title to assistant town manager and formalizing that role as primarily focused on HR and grant writing and grant tracking, but probably all other administrative duties well. And then I think we've discussed, and I don't know if this is part of this, certainly it's part of my idea, but maybe not something we would put in a job description, that this might give us someone to tap as in the future if we needed an interim town manager for whatever purpose. This would, as an assistant town manager, that would be a natural person to take over temporary town manager duties, which I think is a function that we've, have needed in the past.
I agree. That would be my intention as well. All right. The next position, the Lister Administrative Assistant position. Would anyone like to speak to that? Aaron?
I'm happy to keep doing it. The listers have communicated to us directly, and also I believe to the town manager, that they are not intending to fill that position in the next year, and so we're going to just remove it from the budget for this year. And if they want to have an assistant in the future, they can revisit it with us.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that position? Okay. The fifth police officer position. Anyone want to speak to that? Aaron?
So from the beginning of the budget discussions, when we first talked with Chief Cochran, he asked for a fifth position, and we said we would make that decision once we had a sense of the whole budget. And I think we have a sense of the whole budget now. And I think what we are feeling is that we don't have any room in this high inflation, high school tax year for adding a position that we are excited that he's going to rebuild the department to what it was before, which was 4 positions, chief, sergeant, potentially, and 2 officers, and 2 I believe crossing guards are currently in the budget. So that's what we want to try and do for this year, and if we can get that done, that we would be thrilled.
Roger?
I think also the board's position on wages is that we remain open, earnestly open to conversations about wages, but the mechanism for discussing that is through the collective bargaining agreement. The collective bargaining agreement will happen after the budget, and so we will have to use other mechanisms, likely through reserve funds, to be able to, since they will be unanticipated, since we won't have the results of the collective bargaining until after budget, we will have to use our unanticipated reserve funds potentially for any potential increases in wages that come our way. I think that is what we discussed.
All right. And so the chief will be able to work with the interim town manager on all of those things. Aaron?
Yeah, just so that people understand, the line item for police salaries will be just effectively a placeholder based on this year's collective bargaining agreement, but that does not mean that we are not funding those positions. It's just simply that we don't have any way within the collective bargaining structure to anticipate what those salaries would be without just without violating the collective bargaining process. So that's a placeholder, and we are fully prepared to pay whatever the collective bargaining salaries result in, and the hires and the chief's, requirement for those hires. And but we just don't have, the only mechanism we have is the unanticipated expenses fund that we can come up with it.
And that unanticipated amount is budgeted.
Yes, at at something like 12 to 14% of our operating budget, and fully funded at that.
Right. Is there anything that anyone can remember that needs to be discussed in addition? I think those were all the positions that we discussed. Roger?
I think too, we're having this conversation and we're still working towards building our budget, right? And so I will say, let's see what our budget is built to when we're done, right? I mean, Joyce has to enter all these in, and we have to be accountable to our taxpayers in what feels like a very difficult year. So I think we've made good progress on the question of personnel, but this is by no means final.
Right. And we will have more information from her next week, which we will review and confirm. All right. And then that concludes the fourth session item. And then we will move on to the fifth item, which is the third pass budget discussions. And here, what the intention is for the board to discuss anything that's remaining that was sort of non-salaried personnel sorts of things, and basically make concerns known, comments about the budget as it's currently presented, and then just have more information for Joyce about what wants to be put in and what needs to be taken out. So would someone like to, so that we have a method for this, would someone like to share their screen and we can put up the budget items that we want to go through? Roger, do you want to do that?
Sure, I could do that. Yeah.
Or I could do it if I get permission.
Either of you are welcome to do it. Who wants to?
I'll do it.
Okay.
Host disabled participant screen sharing. There we go.
Should be, yeah.
Select board packet.
Co-host burden, Aaron.
All right, where do you want to start?
Can't see anything yet. Hold on.
Oh, I'm sharing.
I know. I'm just trying to get my windows in the right order.
Right.
Can you go down to
Looks
the
like
operating budget proper?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there. Yeah.
Okay, so just starting at the top, is there anything that anyone wants to comment on? Make changes on, whatever?
So just really
Right.
quickly, contracted services, it has $30,000 in FY23. That wasn't imagined through an RFP process to be Guile Mountain, right?
What line are you on?
So I'm jumping right to where the past one notes are, which is we have professional services, which is the town manager search, but I want to go to contracted services first, if that's okay.
That's okay.
Okay, so contracted services is essentially that $30,000 is for Guile Mountain. We had put it in, I'm pretty positive that we had budgeted that estimated amount. We saw that as really a planning project, right? It was discussed as needing more of a public engagement process and some other sort of pre-engineering studies to solve the parking issue in Guile Mountain. So that is what is under, that $30,000 is what is under contracted services. Really quickly, my 2 cents is that continues to be a priority for our community. It is like many years overdue. However, as I said to even Nancy Osgood's in the Historic Commission small grant, do we have the capacity to take on that work right now, that RFP process, and committing to that project in our operating budget? So that's contracted services.
So you think it should stay?
I want to hear. I'm proposing the question, but I guess I don't have an opinion.
Aaron?
I'm wondering if it was in the 23 budget, did it get spent? It's in our current budget?
We didn't do the RFP. I think
So
we have not.
So it doesn't make sense to, I mean, maybe I don't understand how these things exactly work, but if the money was raised for this fiscal year, then it exists somewhere. We could just carry it rather than budgeting an additional 31,000.
No, it's an operating, so it becomes undesignated, right? It's
okay.
It's part of that surplus, right? So if we don't finish it by July, we might need to do this project in FY24, and we might need to put it in our budget. But I guess my rhetorical question was, while it is important, like we hear every year from our neighbors and on that street, but I don't know if we need to start thinking meaningfully about what projects we take on and set as priorities for our staff. And so that's the question that I'm proposing.
Well, let's be clear. If you don't spend money in the general fund, it's supposed to be re-voted, right? It goes back. You don't just keep it.
It becomes undesignated. It becomes a surplus, right? And then yes, with that surplus, to move it anywhere, you seek the authorization of the voters, as we did last year with the creation of several reserve funds.
Right. So this could be part of that request. So
Well, yeah, well,
you
I'm
have to identify it and say, this is part of that lump and we want to do X with it.
that is one mechanism of budgeting. So what you can do is you can like create the warrant article, right? Do the voters approve like an operating budget with this amount to come from something else, right? I don't like, you could theoretically do that. I would say like, do we want to raise tax dollars for Guile Mountain in FY24 is my question.
Aaron?
Yeah, your point is taken about how not just sort of piecemeal kind of, oh, we need to do this, so we'll throw some money in next year's budget, and then maybe it won't happen, and maybe it will. We need to have an actual structure for this sort of project, and you know, in which and a process. But Guile Mountain, I mean, we had a big discussion about Guile Mountain already earlier in my short time, and so it seems clear that this one is significant. I'd say, I know we don't really have any time, but how did you propose? What was the idea of how this is going to work last time? Do you remember, Roger? Was it going to be a DPW project? Was it going to be totally external? Who was going to write? You know, to develop it, or well, I mean, do you have any memory?
I'm happy to answer if Marshall wants me to.
Yes, go ahead.
So I think that's actually an important question. I think this is where we can provide good direction to or a good sort of back and forth with town staff. So I would say, as I think it was said last year, is that this is a planning project. It would be overseen by the planning department, right? So the planner, and they would undoubtedly, through whatever RFP process they had, whatever the results of, whether it be pre-engineering or what have you, decide with the DPW director whether it was then part of a workload with our staff, or whether or not, and more likely, it would need to be contracted out. I think also Guile Mountain, because it's a parking lot associated with a trail, there's been a long history of needing active engagement in with a trails subcommittee of a conservation group. So, which is why I alluded to a public engagement process. But I think this board can say, hey, this is a planning project. It requires the expertise of a planner, and we don't have a planner, but it might be a good project for a planner to prioritize. But we also know that a planner has to help oversee the rewriting of our zoning, whatever, and then also sidewalk projects and whatever other ambitions that our community creates for us. So I think it's a contracted services that would be overseen by the planning department with obvious supervision from a town manager, but I don't know if that helps. And I think it was an RFP to understand cost and pre-engineering and permitting work.
So did the RFP
Mary has her hand up, as does Roger.
All right, I just want to know, follow up to Roger, did that RFP ever get issued?
No, it was how could it have, right? You know, with everything that we had worked on. No, it did not. Mary?
I would just tend to leave it in there as a placeholder and just let it sit there until we have our planning department's more robust. I wouldn't increase it or decrease it.
Rob, did you have something?
Yeah, I agree that leaving it there is no guarantee that it's going to be spent. But if it isn't there, it's going to be kicked down the road again and again. And it is absolutely every year a high priority during the seasons when people do the hike more, but I would leave it in there.
All right, I wonder how many more of those things are in the budget. Did anyone else see them? No, seriously.
Yeah, we should think about the bigger things.
Yeah, I just worry about stuff that's been voted and hasn't been spent.
So professional services, the line above, there's a question of whether or not you want to put a town manager search in. I would say professional services has, does it, legal is separate now. Okay. So, all right. So never mind. So professional services, I think is fine as is, because I think we can just move on from that line item.
But you didn't answer the question. No one answered the question about how are we going to budget for the town manager search? Aaron, do you want to comment?
Well, I think we have a line later on where we got a blank for the town manager search. Actually, that's right there. It's in the yellow. So we can talk about that next. On the contracted services, yes, I agree. Leave it in there. But I really take Roger's point that we don't seem to have a good process for following up projects and making them happen. It seems to be a bit willy-nilly. So something for us to think about a little more in the future, or something.
Well, I think we did think about it when we created a new position in the town manager's office.
Yes, so, for grant writing, yes, absolutely.
Right.
Agreed.
And for keeping track of this stuff. Okay. Good. Next, do we want to talk about this town manager recruitment relocation expense? Do we want to budget for it? Because we're going to potentially advertise. Aaron?
Yeah, we talked about it once. I think my recollection was that we had an estimate of something like 2/3 of a salary for the cost of hiring a firm, a search firm, or something like that. And then a relocation expense. I don't remember if we had a number. Vaguely $50,000 pops into my head, but we didn't obviously put anything in, but we did talk about it. Anybody else have a clearer memory?
Mary?
Yeah, I think it was a reference to Mary Gorman's memo to you,
yes.
Martha, but I had thought it was 1/3 of a proposed salary.
Maybe it was 1/3.
So maybe, what would that be?
It would be something like $30,000.
$30,000 or $40,000.
Yeah.
35 maybe.
Do we want to add 35,000?
I think so.
I think you should assume 50, because we don't know what kind of,
yeah.
I don't think we don't know what kind of recruitment package that may be suggested to make it attractive, right? If you want to do a national search, they might not have housing for 3 months. They might need some moving expenses, so you can treat it as like one budgeted item. I think also the salary may or may not be competitive, and so it leaves a potential wiggle room to make some line item adjustments.
It's probably smart to bump it up.
So are you proposing that we merge those two and just make it 50, or make it 50 and 50?
I would say merge and make it a 50. And I think I then need to support my numbers with evidence next week. But yes.
Mary Gorman raised her hand, I believe, and maybe she has provide some evidence.
Mary Gorman, thank you, because I can't see all of these.
Hi, can you see me?
I can.
Or hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, Mary Gorman, 504 Hawk Pine Road. I don't know what the minimum, typically a firm might have a minimum fee. And so 30 to 35 would be a very low minimum fee. I think the 50 is probably better, or have a couple of calls out to some folks and find out what their minimum fee is, would make the most sense.
Okay. Thank you. So we're going to leave in the town manager recruitment, and for now put a placeholder of 50,000 and omit the town manager relocation expense.
Right, because relocation expenses is also just recruitment. I think it's fine.
Okay. Next item we should talk about. There's a yellow.
It's the record restoration.
Right.
Oh.
So we were going to put 5,000 back in there, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, 5,000 for the record restoration. Okay,
Designated fund equipment, 47.
and that's just general equipment?
I don't know. It's in here, it's 15. Was 50 for a
Yes.
couple years ago. 147 is the same fund we were talking about for the, oh no, that's 14, question mark.
14, yeah. You had me confused.
I'm not sure what this is.
I think it's generally for things like, so when we did our big computer upgrades, for example, our big server upgrade, I think that was the fund that we had. It's the equipment fund for that. So that's how it's been used. It's hardware.
Okay,
And then remember, we had a long discussion about whether or not that could also include software, and it was quite intellectual and long.
So
Let's not do that again.
Yeah.
So 15, she says change DES to RES.
Right. In general, reserve fund is a preferred term,
Well,
and designated
statute.
fund is just, and so that's not high priority for this moment.
So to answer Joyce's question, that I believe server maintenance is where CCI managed care is booked. It could, which I think is fine. It could also be a contracted service, but I think it's fine under service maintenance, server maintenance.
Are you talking about the 15 still for designated fund?
No, this is 40. The line above it.
I see the 40. What was decided about the the fund equipment? Anything?
That it was probably
Leave
enough,
that?
I think.
It was
I
what?
think we'll vote for leaving it.
Probably
Leaving it
enough.
out. Okay,
Out?
No, leave it as is.
Yeah.
I'll leave it as is. Okay.
Yeah.
But we don't know what it's for.
It's for software or staplers or probably almost anything.
Or
Okay.
laser printer.
We're going to
or-
leave that as it is. All right.
Computers, really, but yes, hardware. Computer hardware.
Presumably it could do copiers and whatever.
Right.
All right, hold on.
Designated fund
reappraisal.
reappraisal.
I think, wasn't it decided that that was sufficient?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I marked this one red for no reason that I can articulate now, just as something that we were talking about, already discussed.
Oh, these are your marks?
Well, only these pink ones. I made a few pink ones
Okay.
because no one else was using pink.
Like we needed more color. Go ahead.
Yeah, more color. All right. Designated fund tennis courts. We were going to change that to 40,000. That's what we have talked about,
Right.
which is what it's in our capital fund for this reserve fund for this
Right.
year.
So just really quickly, the reserve fund for the tennis courts assumes the capital cost of $320,000 for replacement. It was decided when we adopted it that 96,000 would come from grants and fundraising, which would mean that we have 84,000 to be accountable to through the budget process, which means that if we put $40,000 now in the next fiscal year, we would have enough money for the tennis courts, assuming we had $96,000 in grant money. So I think this also means that because we're not funding it at 107,000 this year, we're closing the tennis courts for a year, effectively.
Right.
Our new position is going to have to get that grant going. Okay. Heating. It seemed to me at one point that Joyce was worried about heating costs and that they had been underestimated, but I don't see any notification here. Down here, she's got it under petroleum products. That should be larger, and I think that is wise, given what's going on in the world.
Yeah, they are unquestionably going to be higher this year. Any fossil fuel for sure. But what was this? Oh, this line. So apparatus bay. The apparatus bay. Yeah, not the biggest fish. But so do we want to try increase that? I think that is presumably what the fire department asked for.
What line are you on?
I'm on line. This oh, I don't know what color to call that.
That gray.
Beige one here.
Facility.
Hughes.
Okay.
Where it says heating, apparatus bay.
And you're proposing something like more?
Well, we could increase that.
Please tell me what an apparatus bay is.
Oh, it's where the fire trucks are parked.
Trucks are.
It's a big garage.
It needs more heat?
No, it needs fuel will be more expensive than it was last year.
For the trucks?
No, for the heating.
Oh, for the building.
The trucks can't freeze.
No.
So it's kept at 60 degrees or something.
Okay, so that's different from equipment and maintenance petroleum products down below.
So that's my question, Marcia. I think
That's under police.
I imagine that there was a decision in the budgeting to take all of the heating, right, all of the petroleum product needs for the town, right, and put them into one line item. Is what I imagine, because if you look at the history of the public safety facilities heating, like it would make, we didn't budget it last, we didn't, oh, did we budget it in FY22?
So I just need to point out the safety building, the new safety building is all electric. So it's not going to be on petroleum products for heating. The apparatus bay is still heated with oil because it had a new furnace at the time and they just reused it. So that just from the perspective of the safety building and the fire department apparatus bay, there's a line there.
I see.
So
petroleum products under equipment is going to be is something else. It's for fueling the vehicles.
Okay.
Yes, maybe, yeah.
Okay, so if the prediction for the heating under public safety is 3450, why don't we just leave it at that?
I think we're it's fairly small potatoes, really.
Okay. There's a couple of comments from people in case this is germane. So we'll take comments now, but please make them germane to this. Stuart Richards? Can't hear you, Stuart.
Stuart Richards, 82 Elm Street. Is it permissible to talk about the police budget, or is it is that a foregone conclusion as to what is germane?
The wages we talked about are sort of, we're hostage to whatever comes out of the collective bargaining, and then the numbers are of officers are set now.
Are you willing to take comments about that decision?
Well, you can certainly make a comment about it. Yes.
Well, I want to strongly disagree with the way you've approached that and the decision that you've made. I believe that concerns about the size of the budget this year and difficulties that people may have with being able to accommodate a larger budget. But I think you should seriously consider money that's being wasted on other things, like the open meeting law, spending $100,000, up to $100,000 on the open meeting law, while refusing to consider having an additional police officer, I think is totally misplaced. So, having only 4 officers means that you won't have coverage when an officer is injured or sick. And it's no joke to acknowledge that there are stresses, including PSD and officer burnout, where officers will not be able to work. So I strongly believe that there should be a fifth officer. And I do recognize what you're saying about the money being a function of what's going to happen with the
Collective bargaining.
negotiations. But it should be pointed out that the current 23 wages are so different from what the chief has recommended that you really need to pay attention not only to what Vermont League of Cities and Towns is saying about wages in comparable places, but you also need to pay close attention, I believe, to what Chief Cochran is saying, because the current wages are so far below what is being recommended by the chief in order to hire and retain competent police officers. It doesn't make any sense. You know, you'll be handicapping him to the point where he won't be able to do what several chiefs have tried to do. So, and that's really a guidance and a suggestion for the way the negotiations ought to go. You know, if you decide that you want to handicap the police chief so that he can't hire and retain people, that will be it won't work. We'll lose another chief because he will become frustrated, just as other police chiefs have become frustrated with being ignored and not being able to fulfill their mission. So we need to, the bottom line here is that we need to be cognizant and mindful of what it takes in this competitive environment to hire and retain competent police officers. And I thank you for allowing me to make these additional comments.
You're
And I
welcome.
hope you have a good night and it doesn't last too much longer.
Me too. I think it's important to separate. There's a number of officers and there is the salary. And the salary is not really up to us. It's the collective bargaining. And so we're waiting and we'll just see what that comes out to be. But unfortunately, it really isn't a board decision. So the board has put aside money to cover whatever the salary turns out to be. So as long as the collective bargaining agreement is made public or published or whatever they do, then the board will make sure that the money is there for those officers.
And Marcia, just to be clear, the ratification of an agreement is a board decision. It's just that our position as we wait for the process to complete is that we remain open-minded about wages. And that just has to be our position until we finish our process that the full board has to ratify.
Thanks for the clarification. Okay.
Yeah, well, I would remind you that the strong possibility of there being public support for a fifth officer in the form of a warrant to be placed, and we'll find out what the town feels about this, because I just think that you're wrong. So one man's opinion, but we'll see whether there are other people who are like-minded.
And it's true, this can be revisited in many ways, but right now that's what the decision is. Can we hear from 916 telephone?
Marcia, it's Bonnie.
Hi, Bonnie.
This is just constructive. For those people that don't have the presentations right in front of them, it would be very helpful to point out where you're talking about, because as of yet, from the packet, I can't see where the petroleum products are going. Aaron talked about the apparatus bay. Where on the packet is the apparatus bay? There's many of us that don't have the shared screen.
I apologize.
So
Yeah, I apologize. You're absolutely right. And I'll identify which page we're on and the category. So right now we're on page 4 of 10. Okay. Thank you for that, Bonnie.
Okay. Thank you.
Charlotte Metcalf.
Sorry, I always forget to unmute myself. As long as Stuart has spoken to the subject of 5 officers, I would just like to read for you a quote from Chief Robinson's interview during the 2007 study on policing, because he was presented with the fact that the town really would like to have 24 or 20 hours, 7 days a week of coverage. So he was asked what that would require. And he said he would have to have 5 officers, including the chief, without which he could not provide that service. With fewer than 5, there is no way to divide shifts without asking officers to have split days off. In other words, they would never have 2 days together, a weekend, the way most of us assume what we will have in the way of days off, or to have a consistent schedule of a reasonable number of hours to work continuously, instead of 4 hours here and there and 14 hours on other occasions, or to assure the chief that he would be working days so that he is available for the administrative requirements of the job. I'm just quoting from Chief Robinson, who was with us for a number of years, and I think we were all very happy with the services that he provided us. At times, he did not have a 5th officer, but he was able to hire 2 half part-time officers, which really made it the equivalent of 5 officers. The other thing I would like to address, if it's possible, I don't think we're down to the equipment stage yet. May I?
You may.
Yeah, okay. Also in that interview, I don't have it written here, but he said that he thought that each of the police he had should have their own vehicle to drive to and from work and to respond to calls, emergency calls. He said that if they did, it would really be a great relief and a great time saver in responding in emergencies. He also said that if they had their own vehicles, that history showed that they would be better maintained than ones that were just sitting in the lot and were shared by all the police. And he said that each year, 1 car should be retired and a new car purchased to replace it. And he was assuming there would be 4 vehicles, so that 1 of 4 vehicles would be retired each year. And I think that is, I don't know exactly what Chief Cochran recommended, but he did say that we have not been replacing our vehicles as often as need be, or he would have them for the safety of the officers and for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Demo?
Yes, good evening. Demo Sophronis, 82 Glen Ridge Road. My comments are going to be very simple. I had prepared them prior to you going into executive session. Can I ask a question before I make my comments? Was the chief allowed in to the executive session, or is that something you can't answer?
If he had been invited in, we would have named him, and he wasn't invited in.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know, because my remarks kind of work around that. Okay, so first of all, I want to thank you very much for the job you do. It's a very difficult job, and it takes an awful lot of effort. It appears that you're making some progress, and I thank you for that. So again, my comments are going to be simple. In order for Norwich to have, and again, I prepared these before you went in. So in order for Norwich to have an effective police department, the chief needs the proper resources. I took a moment. I was hoping that you would take a moment to listen to what the police chief was asking for in his budget and why he needs these resources. I believe you will find his reasons to be valid ones. We have been round and round on this issue, and I think it is time for all of us to come together and support our chief. The same is true for the fire department, DPW, Norwich Rec, listers, town clerk's office, finance office, etc. And here's why. Each of these departments have needs and must have the resources in order to achieve their goals. I understand that there are fiscal constraints, but costs and benefits are equally important. The ratio between the costs and the benefits. When their goals are achieved, and I'm speaking of the department heads, the town of Norwich's goals are also met, and Norwich becomes a better place to live and work. I'd like to borrow the lyrics from Zach Brown Band, and don't worry, I'm not going to sing them for you, but just as a reminder that we're all in the same boat, fishing in the same hole, so let's work together to get the job done right. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to speak.
Thank you, Demo. Manu Tisson.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Manu Tisson, 428 Hawk Pond. I wonder if anyone on the Select can explain to the general public how the constraints of the union bargaining negotiations apply in practice. So here's the chief asking to hire, I believe, 1 or 2 officers for a market price. You have explained that.
Manu, we could hear you better if you showed us you, but I can't hear you. This is Charlotte. I'm sorry. I really want to hear what you're saying.
I'm sorry. Let me switch.
Can you turn your video on? That might help if we can see you. Thank you.
Is it any better? Can you hear me okay?
Still a bit muffled.
That's me. I apologize. How's that?
Yeah. Try it again.
Can you hear me okay?
Better with your lips. Yes.
Can lip read.
There you go. So I wonder if anyone, so you're saying, sorry, I want to go back to my thoughts. The chief wants to hire people at a market rate for compensation. You're saying that because you're in the middle of negotiations with the collective bargaining agreement, it's out of your hands. Can you explain exactly how that works? And I'd like to understand, if you can explain to the public why is it that the chief cannot make an offer for a certain amount of money to someone? Is it because they need to be fit into a certain category within the contract? I think the public would appreciate understanding the details of that. Thanks.
So, Marcia, can I answer this question?
Go ahead.
The process is such where our attorney that we are working with actively solicited, and I believe in the form of a phone call, the chief's advice on the current collective bargaining agreement. He had an opportunity to talk with our representative in these conversations. So we have been able to hear from the police chief in that process. So I can offer that.
I think what he's asking is, why does the collective bargaining process interfere with the ability to identify a wage for an offer?
Yeah, so if I may, again, thank you, Roger, for explaining something. I didn't quite get anything out of that, but more specifically, back to my question. The chief wants to pay, let's say, $27 an hour to somebody who's interested in taking the job. What exactly is the limitation on the chief making that offer? I understand that there's general collective bargaining agreement being negotiated. I get that. What I'd like to understand is the limitation, for example, that the person coming in has to be put into a certain hierarchy, a certain class, or what exactly is the limitation put on the chief? Not about the lawyer having given advice on some general subject. I think the public needs to understand exactly why it is out of your hands, why our employees and the heads of our departments cannot make offers to people who are qualified for the job.
So can I speak to this, Marcia?
Yes, you can.
It is absolutely not out of our hands. I think, Marcia,
it's not out of your hands.
I wish to clarify.
Said it was out of your hands.
I said that. I said that.
So it was said because I believe Marcia was communicating the process as she understand it, which is the collective bargaining process is the mechanism for wage discussions.
Is that your opinion, or is that?
That is a fact, and it is, and I can tell you also that there is a step grade, and there's a step chart that you can, and a pay scale, right? And that is one of the things that you negotiate and you have a conversation on, right? So that is the collective bargaining process. And I think, Marcia, if I may, we need to hear public comments and not, I'm providing clarity to a process, but I think we should, I can't do any more than what I've done.
Right. Well, to the extent that I misspoke, what I was attempting to say was that whatever we put in the budget right now is like a placeholder until all of those negotiations are finished. But we also put in a placeholder in this budget for covering whatever is determined for those salaries. And that's why, yes, Manu.
I appreciate it. This is my last point. I think based on what I just heard, I think it's a matter of opinion in classifying and structures and whatever it is. The fact is, it seems like it's a select board decision that you're not going to engage on what you can pay employees because you choose to wait to finish these negotiations. That's what I'm hearing. If I'm wrong, clarify that later on. That'd be great. But I want to give you one thing about the 4 versus 5 officers. I'd like to make sure the select board understands do not choose when somebody needs help. It's not your decision. Somebody may, so the town has in the past agreed to 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's what they paid for coverage. That's what they wanted. That's a decision by the voters. But you don't get to choose when somebody has an emergency. So if you decide to go with 4 officers and one of them is training, is sick, can't show up for work, and there's no coverage at 5 p.m. on a Friday, the cost will still be there. It will just be higher because 2 things will happen. Either the call will get answered, and then we'll have to outsource it to another town to help us, for which we need to pay, or 2, even worse, that person will not get help. So do not think that this is just a spreadsheet decision. You don't get to choose when people need help, and you don't get to choose the cost of that help. So we're not talking about going from 5 to 10 people, and 5 of whom are just twiddling their thumbs, having nothing to do. We're talking about providing basic coverage when people need help. And that's not a budgetary issue. That's just a reality of living in a town and having life happen to you. And when you need help, that cost is still going to get paid by the town. The question is there going to be help for those people or no? And that's your decision in the end. But just be clear about it to the general public that you're choosing to not provide full coverage when you decide to go with 4 officers. Just be open about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Manu. Cheryl Lindbergh.
Hi, thank you, Marcia. I would love to have you give me some clarification on what was said earlier about the lister's assistant for the office. Could you please explain again to me what it is that was stated earlier?
Aaron, would you like to restate it? Oh, you're on mute.
I think he's looking for his mute button with a shared screen.
Yeah.
It's we've eliminated it from the budget.
Yes, Cheryl, we understood both from the town manager and from you directly that you were not planning to fill that position. So we removed it from the budget for 24, and it can come back in the following year if the listers at that time want to have a assistant.
So I understand you heard those words, but are we talking about the wages of that position being eliminated as well?
Yes.
So how does the select board envision the office functioning without that budget item to be used to support the office? How do you expect us to get the job done that we've been doing year after year without the support of those dollars? And our budget is not increased at all. We're not looking at an increased budget. We were pretty flat budgeted for this year without any added staff or that type of scenario. So I'm in shock that you're discussing the removal of a very necessary function, which is administrative support for the office. How do we get the job done for the town?
It may be that there's a miscommunication, because what was relayed was that you weren't going to fill that position. If the money was voted in the budget for that position and it wasn't filled, it isn't, I guess I hate to use the word allowed, but to take that money and use it for another purpose, like paying the listers to do the work. So I think the issue becomes, how is that money? I mean, if the listers are going to do the work, how is that money budgeted? And so we're still thinking about that one. Is that correct, board members?
I don't
Yeah. Go ahead.
Roger, I can't see you.
I think Rob wanted to say something.
Okay.
No, it's if the position is necessary, then it's something that one would hope you would have been able to fill. If you're not thinking that's as high a priority, is it in fact needed? So that's
I think
the question.
I think the point that you missed with that statement is we've been doing the work. We've been doing the administrative work so that it's not to the level that we would like it to be done, but we've done the work of that position to keep the office moving and going along. And as we've said, it's a very specific type of person that would come in there and understand the flow of the office and the workflow, that training somebody during a reappraisal, which will begin in a couple of months, would be us doing the job anyway, because we would have to spend the time training. So Pam and I have spent time getting trained and spent time dedicated to making sure a grand list is created each year and done fairly and without having the work to be done in the office by somebody is just an incorrect understanding by the select board.
So then what you really are asking is for that amount of money to be moved onto the listers line, not a separate line for an assistant. And it was the assistant position that was taken out.
When we submitted our budget request, we took a line item for the office wages and put it in, removing the line item for lister stipend and administrative clerk, and merged them to one line item. And as we stated, the goal is at some point, yes, to have somebody come in and fill those duties. But in the meanwhile, we are doing those duties. And as every office has gone through these vacancies, we're not alone in that. And we're doing our best to figure out how to keep the work in the office done. And it shouldn't matter who's doing it for a line item in the budget. It's what the town needs us to do.
Right.
And as elected officials, that's what we're trying to do. And we've really worked hard to not increase the budget. We've worked out a way to make this happen so that we can support the work that needs to be done around the corner. And it's just shocking to think that the select board doesn't understand the need for work in that office to be done, no matter who's doing it.
So I don't think that that's the question. And I think we need to move on, but I'm going to just say the wage that was down for assessing clerk, since that's not going to be filled, what you're really wanting is to move that up to the lister's wage, right? So the lister's wage would change to something like 27,827.
So we had it budgeted out for 3 listers, as we said, different levels of expertise coming into the effort, but certainly budgeted out for 3 listers. And if a person came along that wanted to fill the duties of that position, and we could hire them and feel like it was, something that they are going to be wanting to do and interested in doing, that we would hire somebody and shift the workload over to that person. But yes, I mean, I don't know how to explain it any other way than if it was, merely a line item it would be the best way to handle it.
Right. Let's continue this discussion because we have one more visit with this budget, but we'll continue this for now.
Thank you.
We do understand. Stuart, you've had one talk. Can you make this kind of short? We're almost at 11 o'clock.
Yes, definitely. And I'm sorry to keep you.
No, it's not you. We've got a lot going on.
So, or to contribute to the lateness, whatever. Stuart Richards, 82 Elm Street. So I'm wanting to express additional concern, and I'm not understanding what the chronology is going to be for our chief to be able to make offers in the near future to potential prospects for police. I mean, are there numbers that he is able to offer to somebody in the near future to make an offer to, or is the town manager able to make an offer to hire police at a specific wage, or does it have to wait until the negotiations are finished? And if it does need to wait until the negotiations are finished, when might that be?
Okay. Those are good questions. I've asked them myself. Aaron, do you want to try and answer this? You had your hand up.
Yeah, am I unmuted? Yes, I am. Stuart, my understanding, limited though it is that the chief is trying to hire now. He has advertising out.
My understanding. Sorry.
Perhaps. He has advertisements out now. The advertisements do not list a wage. They because and he's hiring under the 23 budget. This is the 24 budget we're looking at now. So he's hiring now under the existing budget and the existing union negotiated rates. He is also saying in those advertisements and with those, presumably in those discussions, that the salaries are likely to go up next year. But he does not have those numbers either. None of us do. This is a union negotiation that's subject to all kinds of privacy, and then there's lawyers and all that kind of stuff. So he is in the dark to a certain degree, although as are we, as are his candidates. But he is continuing, and this is the way it goes when you have these union negotiations and you have changes of rates. He understands it, as I believe, and is going ahead under the current existing contract.
Well, Aaron, if you know, what's the time frame?
Marcia,
that I do not know, and we cannot discuss in public.
Like it is 11.
I know. That's as far as we can go with that one, Stuart. Marshall Heinberg.
Marshall Heinberg, 207 Willie Hill. Along the same lines, I'm just trying to understand. I assume that a union would want to make sure that anyone we hired would be paid a minimum wage. And if market rate is significantly above that, I can't imagine why the union would object. So I'm just trying to make sure that this answer of we can't do anything until the union contract is finalized isn't analogous to saying I can't release my tax return because I'm under audit.
I don't think it is, Marshall. I think it basically is we're not making a representation about something that isn't finalized yet. So in other words, as Aaron said, we're working under the current budget. The chief could proceed under the current budget, and which is the negotiated agreement currently in effect. And then if there's a change in that as a result of the collective bargaining, the board just makes that adjustment because we've budgeted for it, because we've got a reserve fund for, on what was it called? Unanticipated expenses.
Excuse me.
So that, I know it's hard to get your mind around. It is for me too. Leslie Wells.
Hi, thanks. I just want to be really explicit about something to make sure I understand and that other voters understand. So listening to people who've lived here a really long time, before 2009, there was a history of 5 police officers. Starting about 2009, there was 4 police officers plus a couple part-time police officers. And then I think the chair mentioned last time that over the last 9 years, it was 4.3 plus on average, plus part-time officers. So if I'm understanding correctly, the current board is voting for 4 officers, which is less than the historical norm. So I just wanted, if that's, if that's not true, please let us know. But if it is, I would like the board to go on record and explain the rationale why they believe that will keep Norwich, as safe or safer. And then just one more point. A lot of people say, well, Norwich is a safe place, so why do we need cops? Isn't it causally related that there's a force and that there has been an established force for a long time, and that relates to Norwich being a safe place in addition to, being a lovely community. So to me, those seem causally related, or certainly correlated. So I don't know why the board kind of doesn't factor that in. But in any event, I'd like the board to go on record saying, yes, we are reducing the size of the force, despite, well-established precedent, and to explain why that's the best outcome. Thanks.
I think what you're seeing is that over years, as I looked them up, you can look it up, there was a report by the police departments of how many people were employed. And I think what the board has decided is that basically there were 4, and sometimes there were more. And so I think the question is, should there be 5? And for this year, the board decided it had to stick with 4. That, can be revisited in the future in many ways. And, I leave it to the people in town to speak to that. Is there anybody else on the board that wants to offer any? Yes, Aaron.
I would just say, when we say 4 positions, we're talking 4 full-time uniformed officers, chief, recently sergeant, and 2 more officers. The fact that you can look back and see that there might have been more on average is mostly probably due to part-timers and temps of one sort or another to fill in, positions here and there. In my memory, there have not been more than 4 full-time salaried positions in the police department, plus, of course, the admin and now crossing guards. That's my understanding. It's my experience, and that is what we are going to rebuild to in this challenging year.
And that's a shared understanding we came to. Like that is our shared knowledge, our shared reality. So, Marcia, can we please finish our budget?
Yeah, we can. Leslie, did you have one more quick?
Yeah, just a follow up. So is it envisioned that the 4th officer is a full-time police officer? Or is it expected that that 4th officer kind of have 2 roles, one as a police officer and then one as a community service officer? Might not be the wrong language, which also has important work, but meaning that when they're doing that work, that officer isn't doing, isn't therefore then being a full-time police officer. That's been vague in my mind since the November 22nd meeting.
I think it's kind of the understanding that that's up to the chief. So, Stuart, I know you have one more comment, but we really have to move on because it's 11 o'clock. We're fading.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry.
So,
okay.
just want to let you know that the chief will be required really to working under the current budget. He's going to be hiring or trying to hire people at $10 less than market per hour. So just FYI, you're tying his hands. So thank you. And I'm sorry to keep you any longer than you already have been.
Stuart. Thank you.
Have a great night.
Thank you. All right, now.
Martha, in the interest of time and knowing that we see Alex Northern here, do you want to pause? Is it allowed to pause this agenda item and go to the next agenda item and then come back? Or
how many pages do we have left? Are there 7 pages left, or how many?
Or in 5 of 10 before you started scrolling.
We haven't even done DPW, and there's a lot of the capital stuff document is a factor for this.
And the scuba request is in the fire apparatus that you're whizzing by too.
Okay.
Would be done quickly.
Let's just quickly do the scuba. We'll pause this and we're going to come back to this agenda item, and we'll go to item number, Golly, where did it go? Item number 6 is replacement of the scuba package for the fire department designated funds. This was previously budgeted and in designated funds. Chief, are you here? Oh, Aaron, are you?
I just want to point out it's not scuba because it's not underwater.
That's true.
The U is for underwater, so it's the other letters are the same. So we're not going on diving, much as that would be fun. Hanover does that when there's something in the river.
It lends itself to scuba.
I know. SCBA, we say.
Well, we do smoke dive, so there is a diving involved, but it's not underwater.
That doesn't sound good at all, Alex. Anyway, carry on with this, please.
Well, I'm not sure what I should carry on about. You have the document. Roger was correct in his opening remarks about this, that this has been on the table for a while. We've been alluding to this purchase for a couple of years now, and I think we've put it front and center at this point. I'm not sure what I can add to it. The request is plain. The money is there. We budgeted for it over the years. Here is the cost, and I'm not sure what I can add to the discussion.
Okay, so these last for a certain number of years, don't they?
Yeah, they do. 20 years.
Yeah, that's a long time. All right.
Well, actually, I should say 15 years, not 20, 15.
Okay.
But
do I have yes, Roger.
One question, if that's okay. Do you want to get a motion on the table?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Would someone like to make a motion to approve the purchase of the SCBA equipment?
So moved.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Rob. And discussion?
Well, to clarify that it's coming from the equipment reserve fund. I guess my one question would be one actually that Claudette Brochure used to ask. So I think this is budgeting for 22, right? And it assumes a personal fit. I believe they're fit on each individual person. Is that correct?
Roger, I missed that. Mary sneezed right when you were talking.
I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. So I'm there's 22 of these. Is that right?
Masks.
Masks. Okay.
That we're getting, correct?
Yes, that's my
question. We're getting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so presumably that's for 22 people, and that they are individually.
Let me just interject. So the SCBA are stored by position.
Okay.
So on each fire apparatus, you have a certain amount of positions where there are breathing apparatus located. Okay. So the officer position, the firefighters that ride on the piece. So it's not as if they're assigned to each person, they're assigned to the apparatus, and the person rides in that position and uses that piece of SCBA.
So Claudia used to talk about whether or not it was appropriate to have this many, I guess, consider. And I guess I'll just ask that because she was always fixated on that. And I really sort of respected her work. So
yeah, it was a fixation. I think that's the good description of it. This is the reasonable amount of SCBA that any fire department would have with the amount of apparatus and with the mission that we are tasked with performing. So as I said, it doesn't go by the person, it goes by the apparatus and the amount of seating positions that we have on the apparatus, virtually each one, except for the driving positions, and except for the tanker position, each position has a SCBA assigned to it.
Okay.
Matt Sweat.
Hi. I also just wanted to point out Matt Sweat, 34 Old Orchard Lane. I just wanted to point out that because of the way that we timed this and planned on this, we get a 2-for-1 deal for the air bottles that we get with each pack, and we've saved the town about $15,450 by good capital planning.
Well done. All right, shall I call the question? Any more discussion? Was that a discussion, Aaron, or you were preparing to vote? Okay. All in favor of this purchase? Unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Good night.
And was there, while we're on it, is there anything on the fire department's operational budget that you're looking at now that you had questions about that I might be able to answer now?
I don't remember any. It was pretty straight.
I don't believe so.
No.
Here we are here, right?
Yes.
Vehicle fuel is, do we think we might need more? The number for fuel is already up.
Yeah.
A few years ago. I think that should be all right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the only thing
is fine. Yep.
I will we should check later whether or not these reserve fund allocations match with the capital plan, but I assume they do.
They do, I believe. I personally am offended still by the hydrant rental fee. That's why it's marked in pink, but we won't discuss that tonight.
Well, I think we've kept it at the historical amount, but
we've kept it at the recent amount.
But the most recent amount, but I can tell you that the water district has gone forth with budgeting 60. So
interesting.
But that's on them. That's their budget. So we'll see what happens.
All right. So where were we? Page 5?
Yes. And
so we're about here.
We're finished with Alex's budget. No questions on that. Is that true?
Yep.
Okay. Designated fund for apparatus. Whoa. Page 5, yellow. Designated funds. That's all okay. 80,000.
Yes, that we could glance at the. Let's see. I can glance at the. I believe I already did glance at the capital fund, and that is 80 and 30 is what was in the capital fund for this year, this budget.
Well, let me look here.
Alex?
Yeah, 80 and 30. That's right.
And that's okay with you, Alex?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you very much. You're all set, I think.
Okay. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
All right. Are we at page 6, emergency management, generator fuel? That's highlighted $100. Is that a problem? That's
which generator is this, do you think?
No idea.
Oh, that's for the safety
fuel
building. Probably $100 is, I would guess, the amount it burns by running every month or week or just on a test mode. It's propane. That's if we had a major emergency, we would use a lot of it, but that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
So it's probably fine.
Okay. Designated fund generators, that's at 15,000. And I seem to remember somebody talking about needing one right away for 50.
So, but that's DPW's generator didn't work in the last outage. I don't know that it's an ancient, I think, military generator. There's been talk about it for years. I don't know the status of money put aside for it, but if they do want to do it soon, it will be a 23 item anyway. So we probably need them to come up to us with a proposal before we can add anything to the 24 budget for it. Unless you have something from them, from DPW already.
I thought there was something.
Oh, didn't he come back with something after?
50,000, right?
Right.
I don't know if I've seen that.
Yeah, where was that?
Maybe that was just something from Joyce.
Or from Brennan.
Maybe.
I think it was, well,
Okay.
yeah.
So if they wanted 50,000, is that unreasonable for this year?
Well,
You may need it sooner.
the thing is, that wouldn't be till July. So we need to find out what they want to do. We can't. Oh, Brennan is still here. He has his hand up.
Brennan, go ahead. Hi there,
Myself unmuted here. Okay. So my understanding here is that Chris Kaufman has concerns about the current status of their backup generators, and they had a failure during the 2 weeks ago during the storm. So there are two options, I believe. One is that we have roughly a $50,000 expectation of what that cost would be to replace a generator there. And I think that's in one of these lines. I don't have it in front of me here, but I believe there is a generator fund that had a similar amount of money currently in place.
Yeah.
So that might be the solution. I don't know necessarily that we would budget for a purchase that might have to happen before fiscal year 24. So it might not really relate to the budget discussion, but I know there is a request and a need for a generator to be replaced there quickly.
Well, presumably we could also dip into the emergency fund if we needed to.
So Fund 46 is a generator fund, has $50,000 in it.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps we could look at the capital budget and see what that was planned for.
I mean, yes, I would say also, I think the only building that need a generator is public safety. So there's a larger question for generators. So I don't know how you want to balance that between the two fiscal years, but I would obviously have to come back to it because I think Tracy Hall also doesn't have adequate generators. Is that right?
Well, that was true. I don't know the status.
And I believe there's a Tracy Hall reserve fund, but we didn't fund it because we've always imagined a larger conversation around Tracy Hall. But there you go.
Right.
So we're doing nothing with that for now. We'll leave it as is.
Yeah, I think it's premature to put anything in the 24 budget when our needs are immediate.
Okay. Any disagreement with that? No. Okay. So does that get us to Public Works?
Yep.
What page is that?
Page 6 of 10.
Okay. So I don't remember any concerns when we went through this budget before.
In pink is the line we're removing,
right,
for the administrative assistant.
Right.
Designated fund, I think, is fine. Should we check the designated funds against the capital budget, or Roger, you got a second to do that?
I'm looking now. There's a couple bridges that have been identified in the fund, and a grade paving, and so there's paving and some bridges identified in the 5-year plan. So okay. I don't know. So in total, we were looking at. So I'm looking here now under FY24. You're looking at approximately 700. I think it's 773,000 was the total for the total capital cost, and we were looking at 660 in appropriations.
So for this year, we have $27,000 into Fund 8, garage. What's the best way to reconcile these two?
The highway garage fund imagined 14,000.
Okay, so that's more. For some reason, we should, designated fund equipment, Fund 7 is 75,000.
Highway equipment was 12,500. I mean, I think this was, I will say that this was put together by Fielding, Rod, and at the time we had we were working with someone on contract to work with DPW.
Okay.
So it might be that Chris Kaufman has added nuance, but he should be aware of these numbers if he isn't.
Yeah, I think maybe I did talk to him a little bit about it. I think maybe he has a very different vision of capital planning than our prior, I believe, than our prior heads of his department. And I think we need to have a process maybe with him, or he needs to have a process to do, a little more capital planning.
So
I'm thinking mostly of equipment.
Right.
Fund 7 is a big jump. What's the reason here? I'm trying to.
Okay, so I know one thing is that this may be part of it is they need a new mower, roadside mower this year, and he may have put some more money here to fund that mower to keep the designated fund up in despite the mower, basically. So he has a note here.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, sidewalks. Oh, that's the snowplow, 45,000, and then the roadside mower for 165, and then a 6-wheel truck in 26. So he's trying to keep the designated fund balance up with these capital replacements. That's why it's more than it was.
I think we should assign people to start making notations on their capital budget items so that we have matching documents.
But I think the overall, his entire budget doesn't come out that much of an increase. Let's see, where's the bottom line on it?
Can we just go? So can we get a sense of what the reserve fund allocations are for DPW? What's being requested? Like So we started with Fund 8 was 27. Fund 7 is 75. Fund 27 is 10,000. Fund 42 is 75,000. Mm-hmm.
And bridges is 100,000. 41.
It's about 287.
So that's considerably below what was imagined in capital planning.
What was imagined?
So, I mean, it's presuming I'm reading this document correctly. It's the FY24 request, and it's imagined to be approximately 661,000 in subtotal appropriations. I believe. I think I might be misreading it, but I mean, we're looking at the bridge appropriations, which is Fund 41, and the paving, which is Fund 4. So Fund 7 is, yeah. So I mean, there's differences, and so I don't know to what extent we want to reconcile these. I think, to me, this was a document long sought after, like a lot of labor wanted for this document to be authoritative, and then there's different allocations, and so we need to decide on why we're deviating from something we adopted, in my opinion.
Well, he asked, so if he wants less money and we're having issues this year, we give him less money.
I don't know that Chris, has this capital plan in front of him, or had it in front of him. There's a bunch. It looks like a bunch of this is designated as, at least on this capital plan, is the lines are for particular bits of equipment. Mm-hmm. So and So I think this is just a conversation that needs to be revisited with this department.
Yeah, and I think it's a simple one. Brendan can say like, hey, the board, or at least one, maybe two, hopefully three of us is into this capital planning document that has some appropriations that are not in line with your proposal.
Right. And I think, Chris is got a handle now on what equipment he has and what kind of condition it's in, and which he didn't, not that long ago, probably. And so I think he probably is ready to have this conversation, but it's probably, it's time, but maybe not time for the 24 budget.
Right. I think it's another year because last year was the first time this was put into place and he's had time to think about this. I particularly asked about bridges because I'm worried about bridges failing, bridges needing to be replaced, et cetera.
Yeah, and he has a big new bridges report that I'm not sure was even necessarily in hand when this was done.
Right. Well, I'm sort of inclined to go with what he has proposed because we do have some emergency funds.
There's less money allocated to bridges than in the capital plan. So
let's see what he says about bridges. His bridge management report, $2.8 million in worth of bridge work over the next 10 years. That's quite a bit.
So, I think we have to be careful about adding a whole bunch of money. It's a big difference between 600 and 287,000 if you're talking about designated fund allotments. So I'm not in favor of making a huge jump when he hasn't thought it necessary. And we'll just have to pull from emergency funds if we have to.
Yeah, his bridge, he has projected out his bridge needs, and he says 100,000 a year will cover him for the next 10 years, according to the Stantec report.
Right.
So,
okay.
So let's leave it this way.
He's thought about it.
Yeah. Okay. So that brings us to page what? 7?
Page 8.
Page 8.
That was page 7.
Buildings and grounds.
Yep.
And petroleum products again. It's
highlighted.
Yep. But there's no suggestion of higher, right?
Well, it was 28, now it's 3, so that's 10% increase. So that seems plausible.
Okay.
Not knowing exactly what that line is for. Propane, again, up 15%. That seems probably reasonable for the transfer station.
Anyone else who sees something as we're scrolling down, speak up. Here's another designated fund. Fund 9. What's that one for?
Equipment, $5,000. Complete current solid waste equipment fund is 34. Recommend starting to fund this to address future equipment issues. Okay, so nothing specific.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, what fund?
It's Fund 9. It's the designated fund equipment for the transfer station, I believe.
So is that
dumpsters, right?
Is the highway garage, or is it a different fund than highway garage? Let me look.
Well, this one says number 9. Do you have a number 9?
So I think this is part of the, okay, so this is helpful. So they're separate, they might be separated out as allocations here, but I was looking at a total. So I guess I can just go back and see if these two different ones are the same as the one on my document, the capital. You know what I mean?
Seems to be, right. It seems to be under the transfer station.
Yeah, I think it's transfer station.
Right, but it's coming from like probably just a generic highway equipment fund, because Fund 9 is here and also Fund 9 is above, is it not?
Was it? I don't know.
No?
No.
Okay.
8 and 7 are above, so 9 is
8, 7, 27, 42, 41.
Okay, great.
No,
sorry.
Good. So it's just 9.
Okay, so we leave that one.
I think so. I think little planning ahead is all right.
Now, Tracy Hall designated fund, Tracy Hall Fund 13. Nothing's there.
I'm sorry, Marcia, just to go back to transfer station, I assume we're including the costs for the new agreement with Casella? I don't know if that got factored in.
I don't know if you put it in.
Purchased services is up 60%. That's probably it, right? Purchased services was 4,000 is $4,000. It was 2,500. What's
I don't know where
there's one?
No, that's the Solid Waste Committee, $3,000. Yeah, that's the
Transfer
solid
station
waste.
purchase services.
Here we
And
go.
you,
Oh,
So yeah, it's reflected. It's up 52%. Okay, we're good.
I really wanted
I
to
don't
see
see
the Solid Waste Committee get its own little line item and not be tucked under
no, there it
transfer
is.
station. I thought we discussed that.
I think it's good that they could advise on that line item to town staff.
Well, I think they need to be able to spend their money because they're only doing sign printing and a yearly license fee. And I think we decided that they should have their own line item last time.
I think their request is honored in the budget, but I think like signage is an operational decision of town staff. Right?
Oh, that sign. I thought okay, I misread this. I thought it was like all that stuff that they were printing for instructional purposes.
I think it's fine that it's there.
Okay. Charlotte Metcalf, your hand is up. Did you have something about the things that are being said right now?
I do.
Okay.
Or about to be.
Oh, about to be?
Well, you're about to talk about Tracy Hall?
Oh, yes, we are.
Okay.
Do you have a comment about Tracy Hall?
I do.
Okay.
I think it's about 4 years ago, I was at the bank and I looked up at Tracy Hall at the chimney, and it looked like it was in very, very bad repair. I would be terrified if it were in my house. And I mentioned it to Larry Wiggins, and he said to me, yes, he had been told about that by Herb Durfee. And he asked me to keep my eyes on the road and not go looking around for more work for him. But it was something of concern, and it has not been taken care of. And I thought I should bring it to your attention because I feel that the board and the citizens are responsible for the safety of people in Tracy Hall. And I think it looks as if it's a very unsafe situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. I've seen it too.
Okay.
All right. So there's nothing in the designated Tracy Hall fund. What should we do with that?
Well, Tracy Hall is it's a major capital event of the next year or two. So I don't think putting, a little money in the designated fund is going to be a big factor here. Right. I mean, we're talking somewhere in the $2 million range, at least.
Well, it depends on
I'm
what
just
we
talking
do.
about putting $1,000 in it to make sure you have a chimney that you're not going to have a fire there, that it's going to.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Yeah.
Roger.
So the capital budget plan assumes ARPA as the funding source for Tracy Hall's renovations.
Right, half of it, yeah.
Well, renovations, but things like repairs and maintenance, we've got $10,300 in there. So presumably that chimney could be repaired with that $10,300.
Well, that would be the town manager's decision, but the chimney might not be needed depending on what we do with the building. So whether or not it's repaired or removed is that's the scale I think we're talking about of what we're going to do with that building. So it's not, it's not, I don't think it's appropriate to be fussing about a minor repair to a building that we're majorly going to renovate.
Well, we don't know.
I mean, I'm not saying, if it's going to literally drop a brick on somebody's head, obviously that has to be addressed, but.
Mary has her hand up.
Yes, Mary, go ahead.
Or tear it down.
Right. Well, that's a lot more than.
You had your hand up.
It's a lot more than $2 million.
I just think Brennan can investigate that chimney and see if the repairs and maintenance budget can handle it.
Yes, I don't think that's a fiscal 24
To
thing.
be clear, that Tracy Hall is part of a historic downtown designation, and so there's actually like limitations to what we're allowed to do with it, because you can't get rid of the slate roof, because then you could put solar panels on it, for instance, right? But the slate roof is marked accordingly. So I would say that like what's appropriate for this Tracy Hall Reserve Fund: paint, masonry, windows, the floors in that building. The floors in that building can't be sanded down again. They need to be replaced. So I don't know what you're doing about that.
But a mason can fix the chimney, and all I'm getting at is we've got money in the repairs and maintenance, $10,500, $300. So we could fix the chimney if it was going to be a problem.
Sure, of course.
Okay. So I don't know. I mean, I've had masonry work on my chimney and it was quite pricey. So depending upon what it is, but again, if it's an emergency, we have an emergency fund. But I think we should ask Brendan to look at it. Yes, Mary.
I don't think we should be concerning ourselves with details like this, like fixated on the chimney.
Right.
I think there are many other aspects of Tracy Hall that are equally decrepit.
Right.
And so that's why it should be torn down. But yeah.
Oh my God.
Just saying.
Moving along, we're now down to the pink.
Understand what would happen if fire leached out below the roof line from that? Do you know what would happen?
Well, lots of things could happen. It could get into the walls and bring the building down.
That's right. So I don't think it's a minor.
No, I don't either.
I think it's a major thing, and it's been sitting there for a long time, and we're very lucky it hasn't happened. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing it up. Is that Bonnie Mundy 916?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
Go ahead, Bonnie.
Listen, you all, some people on the board talk very cavalierly about Tracy Hall. Today we had a, for instance, where Judy and I are the only two people in the building. An alarm went off. It was a trouble alarm. And come to find out, it had to do with the compressor for the sprinkler system. I had no emergency numbers to call. I didn't know how to reach out to the town manager. I didn't know how to reach out to Public Works. I called. I got the answering machine, and the fire department wound up coming. And during all of that, what I learned is that my vault is not a dry vault. It is a sprinkler system. So when I talk about losing the documents, that was my biggest fear today. We were very fortunate that Ben was close by and he was able to call VLS or whoever it is for the compressor. And they were able to be there within a half an hour. But I don't think you understand what the loss of the information this town would see happen is if something happened in that vault and the documents were destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
To me, this is very serious. My whole time being in office, it's been my biggest fear. And, you know, we got to figure out a way to protect what we have instead of kicking the can down the road. I just get baffled at how lightly you take in the records of this town when it comes to them being destroyed. I have lived through other town clerks having floods that take out documents. The clerks have come in, moved everything onto stages and whatever they could. It's not that easy. And secondly, when you do have to move Tracy Hall out of town, you have to keep in mind to have a vault that is safe to move all those books to and have them where they are accessible to the clerk, to the lawyers, to the researchers. And the cavalierness that I hear, it's sometimes very upsetting to me.
I understand, and I appreciate it. I do understand the value of those documents. And I think everybody is agreed that Tracy Hall is the next really big issue we have to address. Charlotte?
But it's also taking into consideration where you're going to locate the people who are working there. And you have to give very careful consideration as to where and how the documents are transferred to another facility during that time.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Charlotte?
I'll tell you, I was scared. I was scared today.
It happened today? I didn't hear that part.
No, because there was no one there for me to report to. That's another big problem. I have no phone numbers. I have no number to contact the manager. I have no number to contact Public Works. I had Hanover or Hartford dispatch the fire department. So Alex, thank God, was there. No one. And I'm in an empty building with my assistant, as we are many times, without any emergency numbers available to me.
Well, I think that one we can solve pretty easily tomorrow. That one we can solve.
Last year and a half.
Brent, I'll ask Brennan to make sure that you have all those numbers tomorrow, because that has to change. Okay?
Thank you. Yeah.
Charlotte, we're on page 9 and it's 11:35.
I know. I'm just going to commiserate with Bonnie, because I know how much she carries the weight of this responsibility. You know, none of us could sell a house or a piece of property. You couldn't work. I can't work with conservation. You have to have title searches. You have to have the documents available. Otherwise, any kind of transaction regarding your property, your life, is really in Bonnie's hands or in that vault. So, you know, it's not a matter of, well, it's just a chimney, you know, we've got the larger problems. It is a possibility. There could be a fire because that chimney is not right. And as Bonnie said, we lose those documents and we're all going to pay a price. Thanks.
You're welcome. And that goes to getting the documents transferred and saved, archived as soon as possible. Okay, that gets us down to, I think, the pink part on page 9, which is under insurances. And those things are going to have to be confirmed by Joyce, I think, right? The VLTC?
Yeah, VLTC.
Okay, so Joyce, page 9. Okay, good. And then other monetary articles. Those are the things that we get every year that are just re-upped unless somebody brings up something new. So I think that's fine unless anybody sees something. Anything?
Nope. There's 2 increases, Windsor County mentors and then the library. But I think those are small increases.
Windsor County mentors.
Yeah, mentors is small in amount and library is small in percentage.
The library went up quite a bit last year, I think. I'm sorry?
Those 2 increases that you see, the 2 increases that you see are by petition.
Are by what?
By petition.
Petition.
Right. Yep.
And
the
so
petition is coming into the library, and the Windsor County Partners has also submitted a petition.
Yep.
Yeah. And don't we have to vote those?
The voters do.
voters.
They
Okay.
go on the ballot. Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so I think that concludes the review, and I've got a small list of things that are going in and a smaller list of things that are going out. Okay, do you want me to read them?
No.
Okay.
I think we're good.
All right. I'll check with Mary later. All right, so that is going to
Tonight, though.
No, that will conclude our review of the third pass. We've already done item 6, the replacement of the SCBA package. That leaves us item 7, which is the consent agenda. And basically it was left off inadvertently. There are no warrants this time and the minutes weren't included in the packet. So all we have is the correspondence that was limited to questions raised about the budget with answers provided by Joyce in green ink. So may we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda as amended to include only correspondence.
Is there a second? Rob.
I'll second.
Thank you, Rob. And all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Hold on.
Oh, sorry. Aaron?
I just wanted to make sure we were planning in our future agendas to talk about the warrants because they have to go into the town report, right? And we've been talking a lot of budget, but we haven't talked any warrants.
That's true.
Right. We have to get those.
So, I mean, it just has to happen before the 11th. So let's just make sure that's on our agenda.
Yes. January 4th warrants.
I think that there's a statutory deadline for when citizen petitions has to be. We've generally had a meeting to consider whatever kicks up.
I think that would have to be 4th also, right?
Well, I'll talk to Bonnie to find out when the deadline is and what she's got, if anything. Okay. Anything else? Anything else then? All right, may I have a motion to adjourn?
I moved to adjourn and there was not a second.
Thank you, Mary.
I'll do it a second.
Rob has seconded. Thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much and good night. We adjourn at 11:40.
Later than last time. Good night.
Night.
Bye.